Poem 9. Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia. Summary. Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia, born in Samoa in 1951, received his early education at Samoa College before working in the Public Service Commission. He earned a scholarship to study at the University of South Pacific, Fiji, and upon completion, he returned to Samoa and pursued a career in government. His initial poetry collection, Blue Rain, was published in 1980. The poem Kidnapped from this collection serves as a satirical commentary on the westernization of education at the expense of indigenous knowledge. Petaia critiques European colonization for attempting to erase traditional cultural practices, replacing them with Western ideals enforced through the educational system. This poem sheds light on the impact of colonialism on local education and the struggle to preserve traditional wisdom in the face of external influence. The poem Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia is a powerful and evocative piece that serves as a metaphor for the impact of Western education on indigenous cultures, specifically that of Samoa. Through vivid imagery and poignant narration, the poet vividly illustrates the transformation of a young child, forced into an educational system that prioritizes foreign ideals. In the first stanza, the poet introduces a sense of innocence and vulnerability as the child is sent to school by their mother. The act of sending the child alone to school reflects a certain level of trust and naivety on the mother's part, unaware of the profound changes that await her child. The second stanza introduces a metaphorical kidnapping by Western philosophers armed with textbooks and academic credentials. This imagery vividly conveys a sense of force and coercion, implying a loss of agency and autonomy in the child's education. The use of names like Churchill, Garibaldi, Hitler, Mao, and Guevara further symbolizes the imposition of Western ideologies and political figures on the child's educational experience. The third stanza depicts the child's confinement in the classroom, where these Western figures dominate the walls, dictating the child's educational environment. This visual imagery underscores the overwhelming influence of foreign ideals in shaping the child's worldview. As the poem progresses, the child's education becomes a source of financial strain for the parents. The repeated payment of ransom fees highlights the economic burden placed on the family, reflecting the cost of adhering to Western educational norms. Ultimately, the poem culminates in the child's release after 15 years, accompanied by applause from fellow victims. The piece of paper presented to the child serves as a symbolic certification of their release, underscoring the transformative journey they have undergone within the Western educational system. Kidnapped powerfully encapsulates the complex relationship between indigenous cultures and Western education, portraying it as a forceful imposition that comes at a significant cost to both individuals and their communities. Multiple choice questions. 1. The boy went to school at the age of A. 4, B. 5, C. 6, D. 7. 2. Who was the boy kidnapped by? A. Eastern scholars, B. Western scholars, C. Chinese scholars, D. South Asian scholars. 3. Churchill was a politician from A. Germany, B. France, C. Ireland, D. England. 4. By saying whiter and whiter, the speaker means A. His skin was being whiter and whiter, B. He suffered from skin disease, C. His mind was being westernized day after day, D. He could not learn at all. 5. What did the speaker get at the time of his release? A. Large amount of money, B. Academic certificates, C. A large number of books, D. Nothing at all. Extra MCQs. 1. Where was Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia born? A. Fiji, B. New Zealand, C. Samoa, D. Tonga. 2. When was Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia born? A. 1950, B. 1951, C. 1960, D. 1961. 3. In which educational institution did Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia receive his early education? A. University of South Pacific. B. Public Service Commission. C. Samoa College. D. Fiji College. 4. What was the title of Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia's initial poetry collection? A. Western Education. B. Blue Rain. C. Indigenous Knowledge. D. Colonial Critique. 5. Which poem from Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia's collection Blue Rain serves as a satirical commentary on the westernization of education? A. Lost in Education. B. Kidnapped. C. Foreign Wisdom. D. Colonial Reflection. 6. What is the central metaphor used in the poem Kidnapped to represent the impact of Western education? A. Imprisonment. B. Abduction. C. Enlightenment. D. Liberation. 7. In the second stanza, who are the Western philosophers armed with textbooks and academic credentials? A. Local educators. B. International diplomats. C. Indigenous scholars. D. Foreign educators. 8. Which historical figures are mentioned in the poem as dominating the classroom walls? A. Ancient philosophers. B. Western politicians. C. Indigenous leaders. D. Mythological deities. 9. What is the significance of the repeated payment of ransom fees in the poem? A. It signifies the child's release. B. It symbolizes the cost of education. C. It represents the family's wealth. D. It highlights the child's defiance. 10. What is the symbolic significance of the piece of paper presented to the child in the poem's conclusion? A. It represents the child's graduation. B. It signifies the child's escape. C. It serves as a diploma. D. It symbolizes the child's release. 11. Which stanza introduces a sense of innocence and vulnerability in the poem? A. First stanza. B. Second stanza. C. Third stanza. D. Fourth stanza. 12. In the poem, what does the name Guevara represent? A. Western education. B. Indigenous culture. C. A revolutionary spirit. D. A famous philosopher. 13. What does the poet convey through the metaphor of kidnapping in the poem? A. The child's love for school. B. The forceful imposition of Western education. C. A happy educational experience. D. The child's enthusiasm for learning. 14. Which educational figures dominate the classroom walls in the poem? A. Local teachers. B. Indigenous leaders. C. Western philosophers. D. Mythological gods. 15. What does the repeated payment of ransom fees symbolize in the poem? A. The child's release. B. The financial burden on the family. C. The child's academic success. D. The child's defiance. 16. In the poem, what does the piece of paper signify? A. The child's liberation. B. The child's academic achievement. C. The child's return home. D. The child's graduation. 17. How does the poem Kidnapped characterize the relationship between indigenous cultures and Western education? A. As a harmonious partnership. B. As a mutually beneficial exchange. C. As a forceful imposition. D. As a choice made by the child. 18. What overarching theme does the poem Kidnapped address? A. The joy of learning. B. The benefits of Western education. C. The impact of colonialism on education. D. The celebration of indigenous knowledge. 19. Which stanza in the poem introduces the child's educational journey? A. Fifth stanza. B. First stanza. C. Third stanza. D. Second stanza. 20. What do the names Churchill and Guevara symbolize in the poem? A. Indigenous leaders. B. Western philosophers. C. Local educators. D. Cultural traditions. B. Short questions. 1. How was the speaker kidnapped? In the poem Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia, the speaker employs a powerful metaphor to convey his experience with Western education. Describing it as a kidnapping, he vividly portrays the forceful and coercive nature of his entry into the Western education system. This term implies a lack of agency and choice on the speaker's part, emphasizing that he was thrust into this educational journey without consent. The mention of Western philosophers armed with glossy pictured textbooks and registered reputations further emphasizes the authoritative and imposing nature of this educational transition. The textbooks, often seen as tools of formal education, are portrayed as potent instruments that not only convey knowledge but also serve as agents of cultural transformation. The fact that these philosophers possess BA and MA degrees highlights their formal qualifications, underscoring their status as educators with significant influence over the speaker's learning experience. This metaphor is a poignant reflection of the speaker's perceived loss of control and autonomy in determining his educational path. It paints a vivid picture of the forceful imposition of foreign knowledge and ideals on the indigenous culture of Samoa. Through this metaphor, Petaia effectively captures the transformative and potentially coercive impact of Western education, providing readers with a thought-provoking commentary on the complex interplay between tradition and external influence in the realm of education. 2. How was the Western education stuffed in his brain? In the poem Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia, the speaker vividly portrays the forceful imposition of Western education on his young mind. He metaphorically describes this process as being kidnapped by Western philosophers armed with textbooks and academic credentials. This metaphor encapsulates the coercive and dominating nature of the educational transition. The use of the term kidnapped suggests a lack of agency and choice on the part of the speaker. It conveys the sense that he was forcibly taken into the realm of Western education, without consent or consideration for his own cultural background and traditions. The presence of Western philosophers further emphasizes the authoritative and powerful figures who wielded influence over the speaker's educational journey. The mention of glossy pictured textbooks highlights the visual and material aspect of Western education. These textbooks are portrayed as powerful tools that not only impart knowledge but also serve as conduits for cultural assimilation. The glossy images within these books likely represented Western ideals, further embedding them in the speaker's consciousness. Additionally, the reference to the philosophers holding BA and MA degrees underscores their formal credentials and qualifications. This highlights the institutionalized and structured nature of Western education, indicating that the speaker's educators were not only knowledgeable but also recognized within the academic community. Overall, the metaphor of being kidnapped vividly captures the forceful manner in which Western education was imposed on the speaker. It conveys a sense of cultural displacement and loss of agency, painting a powerful picture of the clash between indigenous traditions and external influences in the realm of education. 3. Was the speaker brainwashed in the Westernized classroom? Why or why not? Yes, the speaker in the poem Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia can be interpreted as being metaphorically brainwashed in the Westernized classroom. The term kidnapped used by the speaker to describe his entry into the Western education system already implies a forceful imposition of foreign ideals and knowledge. This suggests that the speaker was subjected to a powerful and potentially coercive influence. Furthermore, the presence of influential Western philosophers on the classroom walls, such as Churchill, Garibaldi, Hitler, Mao, and Guevara, indicates the dominant ideological figures and political doctrines of the Western world. The speaker's exposure to these figures and their doctrines can be seen as a form of intellectual conditioning, where the ideals and perspectives of Western thinkers are prominently displayed and likely emphasized in the educational curriculum. The textbooks described as glossy pictured also play a role in this potential brainwashing. These textbooks, often associated with formal education, are depicted as powerful tools used to convey Western knowledge and ideals. The use of visual aids and glossy images could serve to make the material more compelling and persuasive, further influencing the speaker's perception and understanding. While the poem does not explicitly state that the speaker was brainwashed, the metaphors and imagery used strongly suggest a forceful imposition of Western education, potentially leading to a transformative and coercive impact on the speaker's cultural and intellectual identity. The term kidnap and the vivid portrayal of the Western philosophers in textbooks all contribute to this interpretation. 4. How does the speaker describe the Western pedagogic system? The speaker in the poem Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia describes the Western pedagogic system as a forceful and coercive imposition. He metaphorically characterizes his entry into this educational framework as a kidnapping by Western philosophers armed with textbooks and academic credentials. This vivid metaphor conveys a sense of being taken against his will, without the opportunity to choose or negotiate his educational path. The term kidnapped suggests a lack of agency and autonomy, highlighting the speaker's perceived loss of control over his own educational journey. This implies a forceful imposition of Western ideals and knowledge, overshadowing his indigenous cultural background and traditions. Additionally, the mention of glossy pictured textbooks underscores the visual and material nature of Western education. These textbooks are portrayed as powerful instruments used to convey Western knowledge and ideals, potentially captivating and influencing the speaker's perception. The presence of influential Western philosophers on the classroom walls, such as Churchill, Garibaldi, Hitler, Mao, and Guevara, further illustrates the dominant ideological figures and political doctrines of the Western world. Their authoritative presence in the educational environment reinforces the sense of coercion and imposition. Overall, the speaker's description of the Western pedagogic system portrays it as a transformative and potentially coercive force, emphasizing the clash between indigenous traditions and external influences in the realm of education. The use of metaphors and vivid imagery effectively conveys the forceful nature of this educational transition. 5. What were the effects of the speaker's education in the school owners, his parents, and he himself? The speaker's education, as depicted in the poem, had profound effects on various aspects of their life and the lives of those around them. The decision by the speaker's mother to send them to school at a young age without proper supervision reflects a degree of negligence. The subsequent kidnapping by Western philosophers, armed with degrees in textbooks, serves as a metaphor for the imposition of foreign ideologies and educational systems. The influences within the classroom, featuring images of historical figures such as Churchill, Garibaldi, Hitler, Mao, and Guevara, suggest a clash of diverse ideologies. This exposure shapes the speaker's worldview and intellectual development, albeit under unconventional circumstances. The recurring threats to the speaker's parents and the subsequent payment of ransom fees illustrate the financial strain placed on the family due to the speaker's education. The cycle of increasing poverty for the parents and the growing wealth of the kidnappers symbolizes the societal inequalities perpetuated by the education system. The speaker's changing skin tone, described as growing whiter and whiter, may symbolize a loss of cultural identity or a transformation influenced by the foreign education imposed upon them. Ultimately, the speaker's release after 15 years with a certificate signifies a formal acknowledgement of their education. However, it leaves a lingering question about the true value and impact of the education received, as it comes at the cost of familial well-being and potentially altered personal identity. 6. Why does he identify his education with jail? The speaker identifies their education with jail due to the oppressive and restrictive nature of the learning environment they describe in the poem. The metaphorical kidnapping by Western philosophers armed with degrees in textbooks symbolizes the forceful imposition of a particular educational system. The classroom itself, guarded by images of influential historical figures and filled with ideological influences, becomes a confined space where the speaker's intellectual freedom is limited. The threats sent to the speaker's parents each term and the subsequent payment of ransom fees further underscore the coercive nature of this educational experience. The financial strain on the family and the growing wealth of the kidnappers create a sense of captivity, where education becomes a form of economic and social exploitation. The description of the speaker growing whiter and whiter suggests a loss of personal identity or a transformation that may be contrary to their cultural roots. This change is not a natural evolution but is forced upon them by the circumstances of their education. In essence, the speaker's identification of education with jail reflects a critical perspective on the oppressive and detrimental aspects of a system that, instead of nurturing intellectual growth and personal development, becomes a metaphorical prison constraining individual freedom and autonomy. 7. What does the poet mean by Guevara pointed a revolution at my brains from his guerrilla warfare? In the line Guevara pointed a revolution at my brains from his guerrilla warfare, the poet employs vivid imagery and symbolism to convey the powerful impact of Che Guevara's revolutionary ideas on the speaker's thought processes and beliefs. Che Guevara, a key figure in the Cuban Revolution, wrote a manual titled Guerrilla Warfare, which outlined strategies for conducting revolutionary warfare. The metaphorical use of pointed a revolution at my brains suggests that Guevara's ideas had a profound and direct influence on the speaker's intellectual and ideological framework. It implies that the revolutionary concepts presented in guerrilla warfare penetrated the speaker's mind, shaping their thoughts and perspectives. The phrase also suggests a metaphorical confrontation, as if Guevara's ideas were a forceful and transformative presence challenging the speaker's existing mindset. This could signify a turning point or a radical shift in the speaker's understanding of social and political issues, possibly aligning with Guevara's revolutionary ideals. In essence, this line reflects the poet's exploration of the transformative power of revolutionary thought and its ability to reshape individual perspectives and ideologies, encapsulating the potent impact of Che Guevara's ideas on the speaker's intellectual landscape. 8. You have completed about 10 to 12 years of school education. Do you also feel like being kidnapped? Why or why not? The metaphorical use of kidnapped in the poem suggests a sense of coercion or imposition in the speaker's education. For some individuals in real life, the metaphor might resonate with feelings of being compelled into an educational system that might not align with their preferences or interests. Factors such as societal expectations, familial pressures, or a rigid curriculum can contribute to a perception of having limited agency or choice in one's educational journey. On the other hand, many individuals find value, personal growth, and empowerment in their educational experiences. Education can open doors to knowledge, critical thinking, and diverse perspectives. The perception of feeling kidnapped or not in relation to education can vary widely based on individual experiences, the quality of the educational system, and personal attitudes towards learning. After completion of 10 to 12 years of education has led to positive outcomes. I have received lots of information and experiences through education, which make me capable of handling various tasks smoothly, solving problems, and earning respect from society. I started my own business, and achieving a good position in society indicates a level of success and accomplishment. I have actively engaged in my education and have emerged from the process with skills, opportunities, and societal recognition. The positive outcomes, such as family happiness, personal success, and financial prosperity, imply a sense of agency and fulfillment in the educational journey. Therefore, in this case, I do not feel kidnapped by the education. Instead, education becomes a tool for personal and societal advancement. C. Long questions. 1. How does the poet satirize the modern Western education system imposed in non-Western countries/communities? The poem, Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia, satirizes the modern Western education system imposed on non-Western countries or communities through a blend of metaphorical language, irony, and symbolic imagery. Here are several ways in which the poet achieves this satirical critique. Kidnapping metaphor. The poet uses the metaphor of the speaker being kidnapped by a band of Western philosophers armed with degrees and textbooks. This metaphor implies a forceful imposition of Western educational ideologies on the speaker, suggesting that this form of education is not a choice but rather an abduction. Guardians of the classroom. The classroom is guarded by images of Churchill, Garibaldi, Hitler, Mao, and Guevara, representing Western historical figures with diverse ideologies. This portrays the classroom as a battleground of conflicting ideas, highlighting the imposition of foreign values in the educational space. Threats and ransom. The repeated threats to the speaker's parents and the payment of ransom fees symbolize the financial burden imposed on non-Western communities by Western education. This creates a satirical commentary on the economic exploitation associated with adopting Western educational systems. Wealth disparity. The growing wealth of the kidnappers and the increasing poverty of the speaker's parents serve as a metaphor for the economic inequality perpetuated by the imposition of Western education. This satirizes the idea that the benefits of this education disproportionately favor the Western institutions and individuals involved. Change in skin tone. The description of the speaker growing whiter and whiter metaphorically suggests a cultural or identity loss. This could satirize the impact of Western education on eroding indigenous cultures and replacing them with Western perspectives. Certificate of release. The issuance of a certificate after 15 years of education serves as a satirical element, suggesting that the completion of the education is perceived more as a liberation from a confining system rather than an empowering achievement. Through metaphors, symbols, and ironic elements, the poet satirizes the imposition of the modern Western education system on non-Western communities, highlighting issues of cultural assimilation, economic exploitation, and the clash of ideologies. 2. European colonization was economic as well as cultural. Explain. European colonization in various parts of the world during the Age of Exploration was not only driven by economic motives but also had profound cultural implications. The intertwining of economic and cultural factors shaped the course and consequences of colonization. Economic motives. Wealth accumulation. European powers sought to amass wealth through the exploitation of colonies. This was often achieved through the extraction of valuable resources such as gold, silver, spices, and later, industrial resources like rubber and oil. These resources played a crucial role in the economic prosperity of the colonizing nations. Trade routes and markets. The establishment of colonies provided European nations with strategic locations for trade routes and markets. Controlling these routes allowed for more efficient transportation of goods between Europe and the colonies, fostering economic growth through commerce. Mercantilism. The economic philosophy of mercantilism, prevalent during the colonial era, emphasized the accumulation of wealth through a favorable balance of trade. Colonies were viewed as essential suppliers of raw materials and as markets for finished goods, reinforcing the economic interdependence between the colonizer and the colonies. Cultural impacts. Cultural hegemony. European colonizers often imposed their cultural values, languages, and institutions on the indigenous populations. The imposition of European languages, religions, legal systems, and social structures contributed to a significant transformation of the cultural landscape in the colonized regions. Cultural assimilation. Colonizers frequently attempted to assimilate indigenous populations into European cultural norms. This assimilation was often enforced through educational systems, religious institutions, and legal frameworks, eroding indigenous languages, customs, and traditions. Cultural hybridity. While colonization led to cultural domination, it also fostered cultural exchange and hybridization. The merging of European and indigenous cultures resulted in unique societies with blended traditions, languages, and artistic expressions. European colonization was a multifaceted phenomenon that intertwined economic motives with cultural transformations. The economic exploitation of colonies served as a means of wealth accumulation, while the imposition of European cultural values and institutions left lasting impacts on the societies that were colonized. The legacy of colonization continues to influence economic structures and cultural identities in many parts of the world today. 3. Interpret the poem Kidnapped as a voice of resistance. The poem Kidnapped by Sapa'u Ruperaka Petaia can be interpreted as a powerful voice of resistance against the imposition of Western education and ideologies on non-Western communities. The poem utilizes vivid imagery, metaphors, and symbolism to convey the speaker's resistance to the cultural and intellectual colonization embedded in the education system. The central metaphor of the speaker being kidnapped by a band of Western philosophers armed with degrees and textbooks reflects a forceful and involuntary encounter with Western education. This metaphorical kidnapping becomes a poignant symbol of resistance, highlighting the imposition and lack of agency in the educational process. The classroom, guarded by images of Churchill, Garibaldi, Hitler, Mao, and Guevara, represents a battleground of conflicting ideologies. The inclusion of both Western and non-Western figures suggests a clash of ideas, and the speaker's exposure to this ideological diversity becomes a form of resistance. It implies a struggle to maintain one's cultural identity and resist the assimilation of foreign values. The recurring threats to the speaker's parents and the payment of ransom fees symbolize economic exploitation. The act of paying ransom becomes a form of resistance, as the family sacrifices financial well-being to secure the speaker's release. This economic resistance underscores the inequities inherent in the imposition of Western education on non-Western communities. The metaphorical description of the speaker growing whiter and whiter signifies a transformation that might be interpreted as a loss of cultural identity. This change becomes a visual representation of the speaker's resistance against assimilation and a refusal to conform to Western ideals. The issuance of a certificate after 15 years of education serves as a symbol of liberation. The certificate becomes a tangible representation of the speaker's endurance and resistance against the confines of an educational system that may have sought to suppress their cultural identity and autonomy. Kidnapped can be seen as a powerful voice of resistance against the cultural and intellectual colonization inherent in Western education. The poem illuminates the struggles of individuals and communities to preserve their identity, challenge ideological imposition, and resist the economic exploitation associated with the educational process. It becomes a poignant expression of the resilience and determination to maintain cultural integrity in the face of external pressures. Best of luck.